भगवान श्री योगी रामसुरत्कुमार की जय। सर्वं योगी रामसुरत्कुमारार्पणमस्तु। We shall offer our grateful pranams at the holy lotus feet of Bhagwan for this Nama Sankirtan session. It is surely no small grace. Every day we have been going through Leela after Leela, inexhaustible. It's Leela Samudram. There are ever so many experiences of the devotees with Bhagwan, and each one depicts how specifically this grace helps, guides and protects the devotees. The invocation of grace could be by the Nama, or by mere prayer, or by dedicated work, or sometimes even not that. It's very surprising how this grace functions. And the grace is nothing but Himself. Now in today's incident, it is surprise after surprise without seemingly being surprised. You would know at the end when you contemplate, when you gallop through all that has taken place, you get to know intimately how this grace has worked. Now we shall go to the details. Sri Muthukumar is devoted to Bhagwan and lives in Pollachi and is arranging a satsang there. Now there is regular puja and satsang and Nama Sankirtan. Previously, in 2018, he was working in a company in Anna Nagar, Chennai. His sister and her husband, they were living in a place, in a house, a separate house, in Cholavaram, 25 kilometers away from his workplace. He was staying with his sister and her husband, who is none other than his own uncle. So every day, 25 kilometers ride, up and down. At one point, he felt it was too much for him. So in 2019, the beginning itself, he found his separate place in Anna Nagar itself and would visit his sister now and then. The sister and her husband, they were living all alone in the house, and the place is 100-acre land. And there are only 50 houses. They are few and far between. There was almost 150 to 200 feet distance between houses, that if one should shout from one house, it would be difficult to hear in the next house. The neighbors were far. His sister and her husband, they were afraid even to come out after the dusk. Such was the situation, but yet they continued to live on. They have a daughter. At that time, she was working in a place, again, a long distance from their place, Chodavaram. She also took up residence somewhere near her workplace, would visit her father and mother only during the weekend. One day, his sister had a dream in which Bhagwan appeared, and he was standing outside the house. He called out, Muthukumar. His sister came out. Immediately Bhagwan said, call Muthukumar. And when Muthukumar came out to be near Bhagwan, Bhagwan pointed to the house and gave some instructions. Unfortunately, his sister did not remember what he said to Muthukumar. It was a dream, and Bhagwan was talking to Muthukumar. She was not supposed to know what Bhagwan conveyed to Muthukumar, and yet it happened in her dream. Muthukumar, when she reported it to her brother, Muthukumar assured her it was no dream. Bhagwan had always said, if he visited somebody in a dream, it's for real. Yet, they did not know what instructions he gave. In the meantime, they were looking for a bridegroom for their daughter, and they found one. So one day, the bridegroom's people visited his sister's house to see the girl. Though there were only 50 houses and they were few and far between, somehow this news spread very fast in the area. Why I mention this? When somebody is looking for a bridegroom, it means they are well prepared for the marriage, which again means a lot of jewels, money, etc. Now soon after that, one day, it was March 9th, 2019, at 1:15 in the night, 1:15 a.m., just after midnight, he got a call from his sister. And the sister was trembling. There was a tremor in her voice. And she was reporting amidst tears, Muthukumar, we are in a terrible situation here at home. 3 thieves came in the middle of the night. They knocked the door open and walked inside. One stood outside the house. The other one went straight to the bureau. The third one came into the room and he had an iron rod. He started to beat us all the time, pressing us hard to reveal where we had kept the jewels. We kept on saying no jewels had been kept in the house. But he wouldn't believe us, and every time we said no, there are no jewels in the house, he would give us a blow with the iron rod. Your uncle, my husband, had 5 blows, hard and deep, with his iron rod, and I had 4. By then there was a lot of blood. We were bleeding profusely. Suddenly, I had no idea where I got the strength. Because your uncle was struck severely, so he couldn't do much. He very nearly fell down. And I had the strength somehow. I just pushed him out unexpectedly and locked the door. They got even more angry with this gesture, and they started to shout from outside, "Let us kill them and run away." We heard it very clearly. Immediately I shouted, "Police, police," as though the police were approaching, and it worked. Those people ran away. But I am not sure whether they are still outside, lurking somewhere. We are afraid to come out of the room. We are still in the room, and we are bleeding profusely. Then Muthukumar asked her whether she reported to the police station, to which she said yes, and they promised to come with the emergency ambulance. We are waiting for them to come and knock at the door. We are still in the room. We are afraid to go out. Now 5 severe blows on the head. Still, her husband was conscious, and she had 4 blows to her share, and she could still gather strength to push him out and shout and do all these things, ring up to the police station with the presence of mind unto her brother. When the call came, it was 1:50 in the middle of the night. And then he was waiting, he was in contact, he was in touch with his sister all the time. The police came. Of course, these people had run away. And his sister and her husband, they were taken in the emergency ambulance. They were rushed to the near hospital, a village nearby, and there's a general hospital there. And there, they just put some bandage to stop the bleeding, and immediately they were asked to rush to Stanley Medical College, Medical Hospital. Now in the meantime, Muthukumar also took a bike. He collected his father's brother, and both of them came by bike. They came to Stanley Hospital, and he met his sister and her husband there. But you see, the misfortune continued. There was no current there. The whole hospital was plunged in darkness. And the doctor there said, "This is an emergency. A scan must be done immediately. But there is no current. So you people rush to Rajiv Gandhi Government Hospital." So again, they had to go from there to Rajiv Gandhi Hospital. And there was quite a crowd already. Imagine a crowd of people who had met with the accident just then, who had rushed there, bleeding in different states of distress. And there were people who had just had a heart attack, were rushed to the hospital. It was quite a bunch of people already suffering. So these people also had to sit there, despite the head injury. It could be very dangerous. They could do nothing about it, they just had to wait. And then the doctor came. It took 1 hour waiting, and finally the doctor came. The hair was removed from the head for both of them, and that is when Muthukumar noticed there were 5 deep hurt on the head of his uncle and 4 on his sisters. All the time, that 1 hour of waiting, Muthukumar was chanting Yogi Ramsuratkumar, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, holding both their hands. Right from the moment he had this phone call, he was chanting the name Yogi Ramsuratkumar desperately. And as soon as he reached his sister and her husband, he held their hand and was chanting and praying and chanting and praying. Please take care of them, Bhagwan, nothing should happen to them. Head injury is very, very dangerous. A hemorrhage. Now, the doctor came and put the stitches there on both their heads. It took another hour, and finally they wanted to rest, but then there was no room. It was already full, and there were many people waiting in that room in different states of emergency. Yet there was no room. So these people sat there in a corner. All the time, Muthukumar was chanting. Now, I should mention a certain detail. He had given a photograph of Bhagwan to his sister and husband some time back, which they had put in their puja room with other deities. And every day, his sister's husband would do puja in the morning and do arati also. And always, when he waved this arati before Bhagwan's picture, he was chanting the name Yogi Ramsuratkumar. That was all that he did. But every day, without fail, doing puja and arati. And now, they were chanting, Muthukumar was chanting desperately, and they were waiting. In the meantime, it struck Muthukumar to go and meet the doctor privately. And the doctor said there was a crack there on the scalp of his uncle, and air could easily go into the head through that. That is very dangerous, he said. And then if the patient should vomit or the blood should come out of the ear, then the life is in danger. It will be very difficult to save. So this was the warning the doctor gave. So once again, Muthukumar started to pray that his uncle should not vomit. But then, within few minutes, his uncle said, "Look, I feel like vomiting." Now Muthukumar froze. But again, he would not stop chanting the name. Somehow, he held his uncle, he supported him. His uncle was able to walk up to the bathroom, and he vomited. And in the vomit, Muthukumar could see blobs of frozen blood, dark in color. And then he was given to understand that when the beating took place with the iron rod, There must have been a lot of blood in his mouth, and they were frozen, they coagulated, and probably his uncle swallowed them, some of them. At this point, Muthukumar thought, what a condition. If somebody had to swallow his own blood, how terrible even to think about it. But then what could people do? People are helpless. We do not know why such things happen. Though of course, it is said, it is the karma of the previous life. There is some meaning and purpose and a reason behind all this, surely. We wouldn't go into that. Enough to say, Muthukumar was still very desperate, praying for the life of his uncle. His sister seemed relatively safe. And now, in the morning, they got a room finally, and then he took care of them, his sister and her husband, for 2 days. The third day, they had asked for some blood test. So he had taken a sample, was waiting for the test along with others. And there was a man seated next to him. And the man started to talk. He said his son had met with an accident, a bike accident. Of course, his head was injured and there was a crack on the skull. And after that, he said, extreme suffering. It is a suffering of an approaching death. It's called the Marana Avastha. The man was crying so much, saying that he was unable to bear the torture that his son was going through. He also said there was some water leaking from the ears, from the nose. And the whole body was twisting in pain. Muthukumar was horrified to hear all that, and suddenly, it's only then it flashed that his uncle did not go through any such pain. What was more, he did not become unconscious, nor did his sister. And despite his head injuries, they were very conscious, and they took it very nicely. They were very casual in their movements. Even for vomiting, his uncle was able to walk up to the bathroom. 5 deep injuries on the skull, and there was a fracture, and blood, vomiting, and yet his uncle was able to walk up to the room. How was it possible? It was not possible at all. He should have fainted the very first time. He should have collapsed. Iron rod and harsh beating. But nothing of the sort happened. They were conscious all the time, and it looked as though they had not felt the pain at all. They were so casual. They visited 3 places. The local village hospital, and after that Stanley Medical Hospital, and then Rajiv Gandhi. And there they did not even lie down because there was no space. And then they had to go through the stitches, the scans, stitches, everything. And they could lie down only when they got the room. And then he knew. He was startled how he could not even be aware of this grace. He knew the grace had acted right from the beginning. How did his sister get the strength to push the thief out and lock the door? how did she have the presence of mind to ring up to the police and to her brother? And then again, the most interesting part is, they did not faint, they did not feel any extreme pain, they did not scream, and they went from place to place. At every level, he could see how the grace has taken over. And he knew it was the magic of Yogi Ramsuratkumar's name, the glory of Yogi Ramsuratkumar's name. And after that, of course, within 2 months, they got healed completely. And there was no, after that they visited the ashram also. So Muthukumar says, even though this terrible incident happened and they were horrified, still he could see the hand of grace all through that. And all that because of the Nama chanting. And this Nama chanting we have done for 1 hour. Bhagwan's gracious blessings helped us through this. So our job is to keep on chanting the name, to invoke grace. And the grace can act in any way. In which case, people may ask, why would Bhagwan allow this to happen in the first place at all? Now we come to the point, it is because of the previous karma that they have to go through it, but once you take up refuge at the feet of a great master, and you continue the worship of the chanting of the name, or puja, like his brother-in-law did, whatever, the great master would remove 75% of the karma, the karmic effect. But you may have to go through a meager 20-25%. Even that is so terrible that we scream and even abuse God for giving it to us. Why would you do this, God? Why did you do this to me? Because we have done it to someone else. So, whatever torture we give to people, please mark it. Sometime, someday, in some birth, we have to go through that ourselves. And we would be in such a vulnerable position. That is when these things happen. So that the pain, the torture is acute. So they say, I have been repeating it now and then. Every word we utter will come back to us. Every deed, every action that we do will come back to us. If you have only good actions, charitable actions, if you only help people all the time, be very sure all that help will come to you one day. If a son looks after his aged parents nicely, he can be sure in his old age there would be somebody, his own sons would look after him. If he should treat them very badly, there will come a time when he has to go through the same pain, same suffering. Similarly, you do any torture, you give any torture to anybody, one day the torture will come back to you. You cannot escape. You can buy law. You can kill somebody and buy the judge with money and escape, but you cannot escape from the law of God, from the law of karma. You will have to pay for it very dearly some other time, because it's an added crime of buying a judgment. By action, even a word. If you have a word of praise for somebody, be very sure the word of praise will come back to you. If you have only a word of abuse, that will come back to you too. Whatever you say, the words have power, the actions have power. Why is it so? Because we think we are doing it. When I think that I am thinking, I am doing, then I have to suffer. This I is ego I. The ego self thinks that it is thinking, it is acting. So it is the ego self that has to suffer all this. But if you have this attitude that I don't exist at all, it is He alone. It is He who is eating through me. It is He who is sleeping through me. It is He who is putting the thoughts in me. It is He who is putting words into my mouth. It is He who is doing all actions through this body. Then the ego self, there is no ego self. There is only the self, the big self. Then you are not bound by your actions or words or thoughts. There is a very nice story about Durvasa. And I think maybe it is Vyasa. He had a very sumptuous food. After getting sumptuous food, after eating it, enjoying it, he would be coming to the river of Yamuna, and there the gopis would be there. And the gopis would say, look, there is flood in Yamuna. We do not know how to cross. We just came across for playing. But in the meantime, the flood started. We are unable to cross this. Maharishi, kindly help us to cross this river Yamuna. Immediately Vyasa pronounced, if I had not eaten that sumptuous food, Yamuna, give way to these gopis. And Yamuna did. How did this happen? How is it possible? When Vyasa took that sumptuous food, sumptuous meal, he had no feeling that he was doing it. All the time he was in samadhi, it was the divine that took the food through his mouth. So when he pronounced, had I not eaten this sumptuous food, let Yamuna give way to these gopis, the nature obeyed. Because it's the truth. As long as we think that we are doing everything, we also have to face the effects of karma. So let's pray to Bhagwan that we should be fine instruments. We should go about our life as instruments in His hands, not as an instrument of our ego. Today the world is facing the pandemic situation because of some past collective karma. All the same, we have to pray to Bhagwan for relief, for immediate relief. So let us seek His blessings for His immediate divine intervention in order to free the whole world from the clutches of this virus and bring back normalcy everywhere. And Bhagwan, the fear is taking root again in everybody's heart, especially in the foreign countries. And there is once again a new wave of lockdown and other measures. Only you can remove, uproot this fear and stop the spread of the disease. And we beg you to enter this medicine, this vaccine, so that it would do its job of killing the virus and help all those brave soldiers who are in the field fighting the disease despite all the challenges they face. Please give them protection and a boost to our economy, and above all, give us that blessing which would help us to remember your name all the time, and the awareness that we are only instruments in your hands. We don't want to be an instrument in anybody's hand, last of all, our ego. Ego is Maya. The truth is the Supreme is within us, activating our breath, activating our brain, activating our eyes to see, ears to hear, and the body to move about. So this body is only, this identity, this body is only an instrument in the hands of the Supreme. And Bhagwan, please give us this awareness to be a fitting instrument in your hands. Jai Yogi Ramsuratkumar.